Before every plane crash, there is a moment when everything changes. A normal flight becomes an emergency. A safe landing turns into a fight for control. These are real aviation emergencies caught on camera. But this video is not just about watching the crash. It is about what went wrong, how the pilots reacted, and what each moment can teach us.
So that's 40,000 US from the firewall back.
On July 5th, 2015, a Just Aircraft Super STL flew a short landing display at Hunter Valley Air Show in Maitland, Australia. It was moving very slowly, close to its lowest safe flying speed. Just above the runway, controls started to fade. Its right wing dropped and hit the ground. Landing gear collapsed and the airplane spun around on the runway. In one moment, a small airshow display became a real crash. But the pilot walked away. No official report was found, so the exact cause should not be treated as proven. What this video shows is the risk of STL flying. At very low speed, there is almost no margin left. A gust, a small control mistake, or one bad moment can turn a careful landing into a crash in seconds.
Depending on their mobile devices, please make sure that mobile frequencies are not overtaxed.
On September 24th, 2022, two Zlin aerobatic aircraft collided near Gera-Liemnitz airfield in Germany. They were flying a formation training flight with the Gera aerobatic team. This was not a public show, it was practice. But in close formation, practice can be just as dangerous as a display in front of a crowd. The two aircraft were moving into a mirror flight maneuver, where spacing has to be almost perfect. German investigators later found that the transition was flown incorrectly by one pilot. The aircraft came too close. Then they locked together in the air and fell into a field. Both pilots were killed. That is the hard lesson from this crash. In close aerobatic formation, even experienced pilots have almost no room to fix one small spacing mistake. When two aircraft are just a few meters apart, one wrong movement can take away every chance to recover. On June 8, 2015, a Tupolev Tu-95MS was preparing for a training flight at a Russian airbase in the Amur region. The bomber was still accelerating down the runway when one of its engines caught fire. At that point, the crew had to reject the takeoff and try to stop a very heavy aircraft with very little room left. But the fire and the speed made the situation worse almost immediately. The bomber ran off the runway and burned. Reports said there was no ammunition on board. Two crew members died from the accident. This crash is a reminder that a takeoff emergency can become deadly before the aircraft even leaves the ground. When an engine catches fire during the takeoff roll, the crew has only seconds to react, and in a heavy bomber, stopping in time can be just as difficult as flying away safely. On February 26, 2019, a Gulfstream G200, operated by Silkway Business Aviation, landed at Moscow Sheremetyevo Airport after a flight from Baku. At first, the landing looked normal, but after touchdown, the jet suddenly turned left and slid off runway 24 center into the snow. All 6 people on board survived without injury. Investigators later found the problem in the engine reverse system. The right engine came out of reverse, but the left engine stayed in full reverse. That pulled the aircraft strongly to one side. This incident shows that the danger is not always over when the wheels touch the runway. On a snowy runway, even a small difference in reverse thrust can make a jet leave the runway in seconds. On May 4th, 2026, a Neva single-engine aircraft took off from an airport in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Almost right after takeoff, the crew reported that the airplane was having trouble climbing. That is one of the worst moments for an emergency. The aircraft is low, slow, and there is almost no time to think. The crew declared an emergency and tried to get back, but the airplane could not make it back to the airport. It struck a 3-story residential building, then crashed into the parking area below. 3 of the 5 people on board were killed. No residents in the building were injured. The exact cause is still under investigation, but the lesson is already clear. When an aircraft cannot climb after takeoff, every second matters. Over a crowded city, the crew may not have a good option left. They may only have the least dangerous one. On February 7th, 2025, a Beechcraft King Air took off from an airport in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The flight was heading south, but soon after takeoff, the pilot asked to return. Something was already wrong. The aircraft lost altitude over the city. It came down onto a busy road, struck a bus, and caught fire. There was almost no space below, only traffic, buildings, and people on the ground. Both people on board were killed. 7 people on the ground were injured. Brazilian investigators first described the event as an engine failure or engine problem. The final cause is still under investigation, but the lesson is clear. When an aircraft loses power after takeoff over a crowded city, the crew may not have a safe place to go. At low altitude, there are only seconds to react, and sometimes the goal becomes reducing the damage as much as possible.
Oh my god, bro!
On August 19, 2022, a Cessna 182 took off from Orlando Executive Airport in Florida. It was a test flight after maintenance, but soon after takeoff, the engine lost power. The pilot had to put the airplane down on a city street near University Boulevard. There was traffic nearby. There were power lines. There was almost no room for a clean landing. The pilot avoided the worst obstacles, but the aircraft struck trees and a wall before it stopped. The airplane was badly damaged. The pilot survived. Later, the NTSB found the reason. There was not enough usable fuel on board. That is the lesson here. Even after maintenance, even on a short test flight, the basics still matter. Before any airplane leaves the ground, someone has to know there is enough fuel to finish the flight safely.
Oh my god, bro! Holy! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god, bro! Holy! Oh my god! Oh my god!
On January 9th, 2025, a Cessna Citation landed in rain at Ubatuba Airport in Brazil. The runway was wet, and after touchdown, the jet did not stop in time. It went past the end of runway 09, broke through the airport fence, crossed a road, and crashed near the beach. The impact was severe. The pilot was killed, but all 4 passengers survived. Brazilian investigators are still looking into the final cause, so this should not be treated as fully explained yet. But the lesson is already clear. On a short, wet runway, the landing is not over when the wheels touch. The real question is whether there is enough runway left to stop. And if that answer is not certain, going around can be the decision that saves lives.
Que coisa horrível, cara. Foi Deus que mandou para aqui. Vamos abrir a porta! Vamos abrir a porta!
On April 23, 2024, a Learjet 75 landed at an airport in Arequipa, Brazil. The jet was arriving on a private flight. At first, it looked like a normal landing, but after touchdown, the aircraft did not stop in time. It went past the end of the runway and left the paved surface. The aircraft was badly damaged. One crew member and one passenger received minor injuries. Brazilian investigators have not confirmed the final cause yet, so this accident should not be treated as fully explained. But the lesson is clear. A landing is not just about touching down. The aircraft still has to stop. And when the stopping distance is not certain, forcing the landing can make the situation worse. Sometimes the safest decision is to go around before there is no runway left. On April 20th, 2012, a Beechcraft King Air took off from an airport near Sao Paulo, Brazil. Only the pilot was on board. Soon after departure, he declared an emergency and turned back toward the airport. But the aircraft was still turning as it came toward the runway. It dropped below the normal landing path, lost control, and crashed upside down in a field short of the runway. The pilot was killed. Brazilian investigators found no engine fault. They reported that the pilot was not properly qualified for that aircraft type and had limited experience in it. They also considered that the aircraft may have stalled during a tight correction close to the runway. This accident shows that returning to the airport is not enough by itself. Even during an emergency, the approach still has to stay stable. When an aircraft is low, slow, and turning close to the runway, one bad correction can leave no time to recover. On January 4th, 2026, a Super Petrol amphibious aircraft crashed into the Rio Negro in Brazil. The aircraft was flying low over the water with 2 people on board. Another amphibious aircraft had reportedly landed normally nearby, but this airplane did not. During the low pass, one wing touched the surface of the river. At that height, there was almost no time to fix it. The pilot lost control, and the aircraft overturned in the water. For a moment, this could have ended much worse. Both people on board survived, with only minor injuries. Brazilian investigators were called to examine the crash, so the final cause should not be treated as confirmed yet. But the lesson is clear. Flying low and slow over water leaves very little margin. If a wing drops or touches the surface, control can be lost in seconds. On March 6, 2024, a federal police Cessna Grand Caravan took off from Pampulha Airport in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. It was a test flight, but shortly after takeoff, something went wrong with the engine. The pilots tried to bring the aircraft back down. They aimed for the opposite end of the runway, trying to make an emergency landing inside the airport area, but the Caravan was already too low. It struck the ground before the crew could complete the landing. 2 federal police pilots were killed. A mechanic on board survived. Brazilian investigators first pointed to an engine failure or engine problem. The final report was still pending. This crash shows how dangerous the first moments after takeoff can be. When an engine problem happens low to the ground, the crew may have only seconds to react. And even if the runway is still nearby, losing height too quickly can make the return impossible.
Parou, vai cair.
On September 8th, 2024, a small PA-18 was trying to make an emergency landing in Teresina, Brazil. The pilot had reported a possible propeller or mechanical problem. There was no clear runway below, only a busy road. The aircraft came down over traffic. It struck a van, then hit a motorcycle, and spun into a bus stop structure. In just a few seconds, a forced landing turned into a crash in the middle of the city. The pilot was seriously injured. A woman on the motorcycle was also seriously injured. Brazilian investigators were called to examine the accident, so the final cause should not be treated as confirmed yet. But the lesson is clear. When a small aircraft loses thrust over a city, a road may look like the only place to land. But traffic, signs, vehicles, and street structures can make that landing area extremely unforgiving.
Muito triste, lamentável. O avião acabou de cair aqui, ó. Tava passando a hora. Tá aí, moço, cadê?
Ela tá lá do outro lado, lá.
A morto, cara.
É, não, tá lá do outro lado, lá, cara.
Ah, ainda bem.
Gente, olha aí, acabou de cair um avião aqui. Aqui vai para Demerval, levou aqui na entrada do parque. Olha aqui. Parece princípio de incêndio. Gente do céu, todo mundo correu. Meu Deus do céu, sabe que o piloto está ali? Olha, rapaz.
Aqui na sombra, aqui, ó.